the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Can we see other examples of when you called men that you did not have romantic interests in haughty biscotti? Are there text messages, emails, or instant messages?
Probably, well, none that I've seen that have been recovered, but there would be some in text messages. I texted Daryl a lot. I texted my little brother a lot.
Shown, not what she's telling me.
Approach, please. Did you call any men you did not have romantic interests in haughty biscotti in text messages, emails, or instant messages?
Yes. Text messages, not the other
In
two.
text messages.
Yes.
If you were not going to marry Travis because of the January 21, 2008 and January 22, 2008 events, why stay with him at all?
It was difficult to stay away from him. It was difficult to break away from him. And when he would invite me over, it was very hard to say no. He was persuasive, and he still had an effect on me that when I came over, when he was in a good mood, it made me feel good. And I enjoyed being with him during those times. And that's something I was familiar with.
Do you feel the guys in your life cheated on you because you were controlling?
I feel it was just the opposite. I feel that they cheated on me because I was too tolerant. I was very trusting, implicitly trusting, and very naive. And I gave them the freedom to be and do what they wanted when they wanted, and I think they took advantage of that.
Were you mad at Travis while you were stabbing him?
I don't recall fear being a prominent, I don't recall anger being a prominent.
On objection, Gracie indicated she didn't remember. She does remember. She should tell us.
I remember emotions, Judge.
All right, the question is, were you mad at Travis while you were stabbing him?
I don't remember being angry that day. I remember being terrified.
Objection, not response. No,
So-
stabbing him.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I think you've answered the question. How is it that you remember so many of your sexual encounters, including your ex-boyfriends, but you do not remember stabbing Travis and dragging his body?
Well, as far as what happened on June 4th, I don't know how the mind works necessarily, but I know that that was the most traumatic experience of my life. And outside of those blanks and the ones that I've mentioned as far as that were alcohol related when I was a teenager, I don't have other blackouts that I can recall, just when memories get foggy, when I get stressful. I think actually that I have a very good memory. I can remember tons of things. But when I'm under a stressful situation, it's as if my mind, if you can imagine a computer that freezes, it's turned on, but it's not functioning, and you can hit the keys, but nothing's happening. Just like the sound waves are hitting my ears, but the brain is not computing. It's kind of like that. So I don't black out during those times, but my mind is not processing the English words that are being said to me, or he screamed at me, or whichever.
During cross-examination, you were asked if you were crying when you stabbed Travis, and you said no. How do you know that if you had a memory gap at that time?
I think that was misunderstood. I said, I don't know. And I know I was probably crying when I said that, and maybe I didn't speak up clearly enough, but I said, I don't know, not no.
You stated you bought a gun to commit suicide, but never ended up doing it. What stopped you from doing so?
I was going to wait until I left Wairika and got to the Salinas or Monterey area so that it didn't happen right in my family's own backyard, so to speak. And I was leaving for that area the morning I was arrested, actually.
You stated you would not want kids with Travis because you would be worried about them. If that is the case, why did you tell Leslie you couldn't wait until your kids and Travis's kids could play together at future PPL events?
I wanted Travis to be viewed in a positive light, and I know that he wanted to be viewed in a positive light. I didn't want to de-edify him, especially not at the moment that I made those statements. And also, prior to June 4th, that was a hope of mine. It wasn't that I couldn't wait, it's just that sometimes PPL events would be family oriented, and I would hope that our families would be able to be cordial and kind. Not that we would be ultimately very close, but just that was a hope of mine, that we could someday be happy for each other in our respective marriages. And I didn't want to say anything bad about him.
A lot of your answers to the questions you were asked made it seem like you put Travis's feelings and priorities before your own. If that were true, why didn't you call for help after you shot Travis?
Usually his priorities went before mine when it was something that he wanted. When the gun went off, I didn't know that I had shot him. I thought it hit a wall. So as far as not calling 911, immediately after it wasn't an option, he lunged at me and we fell and wrestled there for a quick second before I broke away. And then as far as not calling 911, like I said, I can't really explain my state of mind immediately following, and after that it was basically fear-based as far as not calling any authority or telling any authority at all.
Why did you decide to tell the truth 2 years after the killing?
It took 2 years because I was very deeply ashamed of what had happened. I used to consider people who were violent in any form to be somewhat unevolved. That's how I looked at it. And now I was that kind of person to a very extreme degree. And I was horrified with myself and very ashamed. And it wasn't the kind of person that I was trying to portray to the world, as well as who I even believed I ever could be, inside or out. However, as time went on and I evolve and I mature and I gain more perspective as things get farther away, there were a lot of people that reached out to me and offered support because they believed in my stupid story. And I felt really bad for that because they were there for me and they wanted to offer moral support. And I felt fraudulent the farther along things got. At first it was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to be dead soon, so I won't have to answer that. And then it started off as a secret that I wanted to take to my grave with me, and then it became one that I didn't want to keep anymore. So it wasn't an overnight decision. It was a very gradual process, and I felt fraudulent. You start just feeling, I mean, obviously I did from the beginning, but it becomes a really yucky feeling inside. It doesn't feel good.
What made you change your mind and tell everyone about Travis's secret, the child picture?
Well, the first time I decided to was when I was talking to a psychologist from California, and we were exploring dynamics of our relationship. And it took me a long time, but several months beyond that, I told other people. It became, I had made a promise to him that I would never say anything, and so he made a promise that he would get help. And I wanted to keep my promise. I didn't want to throw mud on him. It's not like he was a threat, that anything was going to happen to any children at this point. Why even go there? Why tell anyone? But it was such a huge part of our relationship, and that everything thereafter changed. Everything. So when I realized that, in retrospect, I don't think he ever upheld his end of the bargain, I felt less obligated to keep that secret, and also it changed everything in our relationship. So leaving that element out, it's like a huge missing piece of the puzzle of how things ultimately evolved the way they did.
You said you were sick to your stomach when you saw Travis with child pictures. So why did you sleep with him again?
Well, after throwing up a few times that day, I wanted to talk to him and give him a chance to explain what was going on. So we ended up getting together later on after FHE, much later in the evening. And he gave me a tearful explanation, and I felt more sympathetic toward him than disgusted at that point because of how he explained it to me.
Would you classify your relationship with Travis Alexander as a love-hate relationship?
It certainly had all the motions of a love-hate relationship, but I never felt that I hated Travis. I screamed that out one time when he wasn't present after a really mean phone call, but I never felt hatred toward Travis, although we had those ups and downs that were pretty extreme.
On June 4, 2008, after you got up and ran toward the closet, is it possible that Travis picked up the camera on the bathroom floor and moved it?
Yeah, and to clarify, I didn't run toward the closet. I ran down the hall right after I rolled away from him. And that's completely possible, and that's an idea I've entertained also, but I didn't see anything. I just ran, and I didn't look back.
Could that also explain the delay in his arrival and his anger in the closet at the door threshold?
Would that be the camera related?
Yes.
It certainly could. The delay, maybe the floor was wet and I don't know if it just the traction, but I mean, with him getting down the hallway, I don't know. But the camera, I don't even remember how the camera ended up where it did, so I don't know if he picked it up and inspected it or how it got kicked around, or if it got kicked around, that kind of thing.
Given that there are guiding principles such as the law of attraction and practices like passing down journals to future generations, do you feel the Mormon religion encourages burying the truth about issues that may be considered embarrassing?
Encourages bearing the truth?
Yes.
Well, to be clear, the law of attraction and the Mormon church are two separate animals. They intertwine in some ways with certain scripture, but they are completely separate. In Mormonism, being a religion, I felt that there was an unspoken undercurrent in the church which puts pressure on members to present a squeaky clean image. However, I know that's not official church policy, even though that you feel that pressure when you're in the church. My understanding of official church policy is if you have transgressed in any way, no matter how embarrassing, if it's a serious transgression, it's dealt with internally in the church, internally inside, but also with a church authority such as your bishop or any other appropriate church authority. The law of attraction, the way I embraced it 4 or 5 years ago, I was in denial. Like, I didn't want to deal with the negative things I was going through because I felt that by dealing with them, I would then be focusing on them, and then that would attract more of them, rather than dealing with them in a healthy way to eradicate them. So I kind of lost track of the question. I'm sorry.
The question was, do you feel the Mormon religion encourages burying the truth about issues that may be considered embarrassing?
The Mormon religion, yes. You are encouraged always to tell the truth no matter how bad it is. That doesn't mean broadcasting it, but going through the appropriate channels for repentance.
Can you give a few examples of what might be considered negative other than those already discussed?
Negative experiences?
Just says negative. I think it's in connection with your journals.
Well, I don't know that that means specifically to me, but other than the violating the law of chastity or violence, that kind of thing, words that you speak. There's doctrine in the church which says that every word that flows from our mouth, we will be held accountable for those words one day. So that's an example of something negative. I know some Mormons that drink. That's an example of something negative. I know gay Mormons and homosexuality is prohibited in the church. That's something the church considers negative. It's not my philosophy. There are things to that effect. I mean, plenty of things that go on and on. So, I mean, I guess there would be an example as far as the homosexuality goes, because Travis wanted to have a threesome with another woman, and I'm not gay, but it was something I was contemplating going along with. So that obviously, in addition to the sexual sin, depending on what interaction I may or may not have had with that woman, could also be a violation of another law in that regard.
How do you determine when you will tell the truth and when you will not tell the truth? What are the determining factors?
Anything that related back to my involvement in Travis's death or de-edifying him in any way, I covered up. I attempted to cover up. So the lies that I told after all of this happened were directly related to those two main themes.
When did you find Travis's gun?
It would have been October, November, sometime in the fall. It was before Christmas, 2007. I know it was before Christmas. I don't remember the exact time in the fall.
Was it kept loaded in the closet?
He told me it was not loaded.
Objection, here's. That's out.
Okay.
You told me what.
Overruled.
He assured me it wasn't loaded because
Objection now, the hearsay.
Oh, I'm
Sustained.
sorry.
Sustained.
Oh, okay. Should I?
Wait for another question.
Okay.
Today, March 5, 2013, you stated before lunch that you think you fill the car up first. If you did have the third gas can, as we saw in several hypothetical situations after lunch, do you see it possible to put 8.301 gallons of gas in the car, exhibit number 237.011, and then 9.59 gallons and 2.774 gallons for a total of 12.368 gallons in the remaining 3 gas cans? Exhibits 237.011, 237.012, and 237.013.
Okay, that was a lot of elements to that question. So first, I didn't have 3 gas cans.
Objection, no response. She was asking if it was possible, assuming she had 3 gas cans.
Overruled. You may continue.
I didn't have 3 gas cans. I believe we were discussing a hypothetical if I had 3 gas cans. No, it wouldn't make sense to put only 2 gallons and change into 1 gas can while filling up the others. And as far as whether I think I filled up the car first or not, I honestly don't know what came first. I do remember having a fear of filling the gas can, overfilling them, because I didn't want overflow because it's a highly flammable substance. So I remember that, so I can't say that I filled them all the way to their maximum capacity or not. But I wouldn't have only put 2 gallons in one if I'd filled up 2 more. I only had 2 anyway. So there were never 3 on that trip when I pulled out of Salinas.
You initially testified that sex was a way for Travis to relieve stress, and later testified it was a way for him to relieve anger, which is correct.
Both are correct. Anger was stressful, and he had the term de-stress, and sex was a way to de-stress. And it seemed like after he climaxed that he felt a lot more calm.
How do you know that?
Based on his demeanor and conversations we've had regarding that and requests that he's made specifically to that, of that nature, and the term de-stress.
Would a screwdriver be required to take off the license plates?
I heard...
Objection, Pearson.
Sustained.
Okay.
Would a screwdriver be required to take off the license plates?
I believe so, because Ryan had to borrow a screwdriver from...
Sustained. Did you find it strange that only your license plate was messed with in that parking lot?
I don't know that only my license plate was messed with.
If you were driving to a place you had never been before, meaning Utah, why wouldn't you map out different towns that would have gas stations or rest stations?
I did go to MapQuest to determine the number of hours it might take, and I printed out MapQuest directions, and I also printed out MapQuest directions from San Diego to West Jordan, as well as Pasadena or Los Angeles, whichever area, to West Jordan. I wouldn't know what website to even visit. I guess I could have gone to Google and just typed in where are the gas stations on I-5 to bring all that up. I'm not aware of a website that specifically shows those things. It's for that purpose. I only knew of MapQuest, and I printed directions that way because I had relied on my GPS all these years, but I wasn't going to be taking that car with the GPS, which usually just guided me and could tell me where the gas stations were.
Did you ever see a doctor for your memory issues?
I don't believe that I have memory issues that are really persistent. I just have trouble processing things under stressful circumstances. And June 4th is kind of in a class of its own. Outside of those things, I feel like I have a really good memory, and I never thought to seek medical help or any kind of professional help for that.
If you were scared of Travis's anger and violence, why would you go upstairs when he was banging his head, knowing he was already mad?
Well, Travis had never, I didn't know he was banging his head. I just didn't know what this steady noise was. It was kind of just a pounding, not incredibly loud, but loud enough to hear from downstairs. And 2, he had never been violent with me prior to that, except, it wasn't violent. The only time he'd been physical was when he grabbed my wrist at the convention. So I didn't really fear physical harm from him at that point in time.
Did Travis ever tell you he kept his gun loaded?
He told me of one time that he considered loading it, but he assured me that it was not loaded.
If you did not think the gun was loaded, why chance grabbing a gun that may not be loaded instead of just running outside?
I grabbed the gun not because I intended to shoot him. I grabbed the gun because my thought is that if a gun is pointed, you stop. Whether it's loaded or not, I've always been taught you don't point guns at people, period, just as a safety precaution. So I can only imagine what I would do in that situation. If a gun were pointed at me, I would stop. And I was hoping that it would have that effect on him.
You stated that when you walked out of Starbucks, you did not notice anything wrong with the back of the car. How is it that the back license plate ended upside down?
I didn't see anyone turning my license plate upside down, nor did I notice the license plate when I walked out. What I noticed is kids skating away from my car. It's possible that it could have happened.
Overruled.
It's possible that it could have happened at any point during my trip. I could have even rented the car that way and never noticed. But I believe...
Sustained. Why did you plan on going to see John Dixon when you were on your way to Utah to see Ryan?
John Dixon was a friend. Although there was somewhat of an interest there, it was nothing that I ever let grow because he wasn't a church member, so it would be kind of a poor investment of my heart to get attached to somebody who was not a member of the church. What I was going down there for is he had a friend who either owned a gallery or ran a gallery where he hung some of the greats, such as Van Gogh and Monet. And when I told him I painted, he said, we can make a space in this gallery for you. I can hang it right next to a Monet or Van Gogh. It sounded like a very exciting thing for me because one of my goals at that time was to get my paintings into galleries.
How many men were you willing to be involved with at the same time?
Well, it depends on the level of intimacy. As far as a boyfriend, I have one boyfriend at a time. An intimate partner, one at a time. In the church, you are encouraged to go on.
Objection, non-responsive. She's answered one at a time.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Counsel.
Objection, non-responsive. She's already indicated one, and then she wants to talk about the church.
It varies.
She was explaining her answer and her beliefs about dating as the question called for.
Overruled. You may continue.
In the church, you're encouraged to date around and find somebody that you might be compatible with and not to get too serious with somebody that you don't think you would be very compatible with. So Mormons are encouraged to go on group dates and not spend too much time together with only one person unless you are certain that you're going to start getting serious with that person.
Did you ever seek medical help for your mental condition?
I'm not sure what mental condition that refers to. But
Have you ever taken medication for your memory issue?
no.
Did you ever tell anyone about your condition prior to the killing?
I don't really think I had much of a condition prior to the killing. I have ADD, I think, because I space out, but I don't.
She was after she told somebody about it, not what.
Sustained.
Okay.
You told us that you were not able to make out the license plate leaning against the curb in front of your car because you are nearsighted and did not get glasses until 2010. What is your prescription in each eye?
My understanding is that my prescription is negative 2.5 and negative 2.25.
Is there anyone who saw you shaking during a fight with Travis?
Dan saw me visibly upset after, but I don't think anybody saw us fighting during, at least to the level of fights where it would cause me to shake.
Do any of your journal entries or any other items discuss you shaking or blacking out or getting scrambled?
Possibly allusions to getting scrambled, but I had not blacked out. Except, like I said, those 2 times when they were alcohol induced. One time I did induce blacking out with some friends. That was earlier than that, and that was a one-time incident. But I didn't journal blacking out because there were no incidents during those times that I was journaling. And shaking, I shook when I wrote, but I didn't write that I was shaking. So probably only when I got scrambled. There were times when I would write things.
You claim to have memory lapses or gaps during times of stress, such as when you are being yelled at or grilled. How is it that you have such vivid and specific memories of violence and yelling by Travis such a long time ago, if this is the case?
With the violence, it's not that I have to process the English language. It's more, I feel those things. I know he broke my finger because it's still broken, or it's healed, but it's crooked. I know he choked me out because I woke up from being unconscious. As far as him yelling, I know he's yelling because there's a loud volume and it has an effect on me. I don't know all the things he said. For example, the night he said disparaging things about my grandfather and my brother. Those stand out. But that's all I can remember of a 3-hour session of him screaming at me before I was able to leave. So many things were said, mean things, and I didn't process them all. Some I wrote down, and that's when he made me tear them out. So I didn't write them after that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the evening recess. Please be back in the designated area at 10:15. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice evening. The jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down. Counsel, anything else for today?
Nothing, ma'am. Thank you.
Have a nice evening.